GovTech continua e agora eu vou chamar ao palco para ser entrevistado o fundador e sócio-gerente da TPG Growth, a plataforma global da empresa TPG, que administra mais de 13 bilhões de dólares em ativos em vários setores, entre eles mídia, tecnologia e indústria. Em 2016, ele cofundou o The Rise Fund, um fundo de investimento de impacto de mais de 2 bilhões de dólares, gerido junto com o cantor Bono Vox e o primeiro presidente do eBay, Jeff Skoll. Esse é o maior fundo de impacto já levantado. Em 2017, a Vanity Fair o nomeou como uma das 100 pessoas mais influentes em negócios, política e tecnologia. Com vocês, Bill McGlashan. E para entrevistá-lo, gostaria de chamar ao palco Luciano Huck e Ronaldo Lemos.
De volta. Hi, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
Welcome.
Always good to be with my friend.
Yeah, and Ronaldo back on the stage. Yeah. You're going to sing in the end of the day.
I've been here for too long, I feel, but that's all right.
So, first of all, Bill, it's an honor to have you here. You know how much I admire you, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a human being, how capable you are to build bridges between different worlds. You go from entertainment to politics, you go from social impact to big companies. So we spend the day here, and tomorrow again, our goal here is to try to start building a digital agenda for the public sector in Brazil. And lots of the examples that we listen today of India and Estonia and India and Uruguay, lots of them we could understand that the solution for most of the problems that we have to scale the solutions was to put the private sector together with the governments and building solutions in four hands, and it was really good. So what I want to start asking you, my personal belief is that the investment with social impacts is the future. Say the new Steve Jobs, the new Bill Gates for the next generation will be people capable to do really relevant social impact investments. And as Gigi, muito obrigado Gigi mais uma vez pela presença. You raised the biggest impact fund ever together with Jeff Skoll and Bono Vox. And I think in countries like Brazil that have a huge gap, social gap, I think this kind of investment could be a giant step forward. I just told you before here, I'm not sure if you know, but I told you like 5 minutes ago before I got in there, just in the favelas in Brazil, we have 8 million entrepreneurs inside the favelas. So, and I can totally tell you that the government don't look too much and don't help too much these entrepreneurs, that it's all over Brazil. So I want to ask you why this movement and how you guys are creating ideas with social impact investment. So this is the first thing that I want to put you and listen to you. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, all of you, for having me here. It's a real honor to be here in the context of what you all are all about with GovTech. And you know, there could be no more important purpose than what you're trying to accomplish. And I've always been in awe of how you spend your time and what you stand for and what you're trying to do for this country. So I'm grateful to be here and to be in your presence. My journey around all of this actually began when I started an NGO, a non-governmental organization, right out of college. I graduated from college and I was able to talk the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and Bill Draper, who was at the time running the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, into supporting me to start something called World Service. And the idea was to unite Peace Corps around the world, equivalent to US Peace Corps, back then the Komsomol in the Soviet Union, the JOCV, the UN volunteers, etc., to create multinational teams to solve fundamental development problems. And I moved to Dar es Salaam, and this was back when Julius Nyerere was still alive, and I was working with Oscar Arias Sanchez in Costa Rica, and I was intent on changing the world. And I very quickly realized that with all these great intentions, philanthropy and government alone was not going to solve the problem, to your point. And you know, just the demographics alone in the continent of Africa, 15 million jobs a year are required to keep up with the demographics. So problems will not get solved without the scalability, sustainability, and innovation engine that is commerce. And to your point on those entrepreneurs in the favelas, given the right kind of support, the capital, the access to strategic capabilities, business building expertise, etc., people can create from nothing. People can create real vibrant businesses that can scale, can change their lives, and we see it all the time. We have a business in India with 400,000 small stakeholder farmers, and that simple act of giving them, and that's, by the way, where 70% of the poor are on earth, is small stakeholder farmers. By giving them access to credit, by giving them access to better inputs, by knowing that they have the availability of a long-term contract and a reliable source of offtake for their milk product, they've been able to increase their household income by 70%. And with that kind of uplift, you get education and healthcare and all the other attendant benefits that come when these little entrepreneurs, called small stakeholder farmers, can get more effective at producing more of what they do. And that's what they want. They want to feed their families, take care of their broader community. So it's a remarkable engine when maximized and when supported.
But just to understand, the metric that you're using to decide investment with social impact is the same metric that is used at TPG Growth or TPG. And beside that, if you can give us some examples of what you've been creating along you raise the money to the Rise Fund and which kind of business you're in and all over the world, to understand in Brazil how we can copy-paste this kind of initiative.
Yeah. So in fact, there was a gentleman named Sir Ronnie Cohen who has been a pioneer started social finance and bridges in the UK, and he made a comment to me some time ago, Bill, you've been doing lots of investments with impact, but you haven't been doing impact investing. And the big difference between what we've done historically and what we're doing now is we set out to solve three big problems with impact investing and with what we've been doing. The first was the ability to measure impact, because unless you have the ability to underwrite the impact, the pro forma impact you're going to be delivering with a business or an initiative, unless you have the ability to underwrite it, measure it, and ultimately report on it, including audit it, it's not really credible. It'll never scale. So the first was measurability. The second was scale. And those two are related because no one has ever built a big impact platform before, so no one had the ability to afford to do all the work to figure out how you'd underwrite impact and report on it and have the kind of megaphone to tell the story in a big way that Bonovox gives us and the others on the Founders Board. And the third was to demonstrate that there's no conflict between impact and return. And we set out to solve those three problems.
Profit is not a sin.
Profit is not only is it not a sin, but interestingly, if you don't build a business that has the ability to scale the way a profitable business does, your impact is dramatically impeded. It's tautological. If the output of a business is that which creates the impact, by definition, you need the business to thrive and scale and survive and thrive in order to then deliver that great impact that you're underwriting from the output of the business.
But
so they're not in conflict.
Okay, sitting here in my front, there's Arminio Fraga. There's one of the most brilliant minds that I ever met and been a very close friend on sharing ideas, how we can scale solutions and how we can, in 20 years, look behind and see that we truly make something that makes a difference in the country. And from he came from the same background of you as an investment mindset on the private sector. So what is the change of mindset that a guy like you or Arminio have to look different, to try to find social, because the business and the companies from the classic investments, they come easy. It's always, so how do you research and how do you curate this kind of social investments, of course to be profit, but by the end that makes a difference in the community, of the city, and can scale for the country or for the world?
So the magic of the effort that we launched was once we found a way, and it took us several years and millions of dollars of investment from us. We partnered with Bridgespan, a bunch of leading universities and other organizations around the world. You know, Omidyar Network has done a ton of great work, Skoll and others. So we leveraged all those organizations to begin from a place where we then had to progress. So we started with a great head start with all the work that had been done, standing on the shoulders of giants. But what we realized was once we'd actually figured out a way to measure impact, it opened up a completely different perspective on the way you invest against impact. Because it's not always obvious. If you stay focused only on the areas that have historically been assumed to be impactful, bottom of the pyramid, healthcare in India, that's a very limited domain to invest against. But when we created the ability to then proactively hunt for impact, because we understood where it's being created, and we have companies that are going to generate 121 times multiple of money in auditable impact. So I invest $1 and I get from that 121 times that in social impact or environmental impact that I can actually measure and that KPMG will audit. And this is extraordinary when you think of the amplification. The only way to go find those opportunities is if you have a way of measuring it so that 121 becomes obvious. So we went through the exercise of finding a way to do it. The commitment we've made is that methodology will be made available for others. And the interesting implications is what it means for governments, what it means for corporations, what it means for philanthropies, because our big problem as a human race has been externalities. We don't know how to factor externalities into the way we make decisions. Every investment has an impact. The question, is it a good impact? Is it a neutral impact or a bad impact? Every investment has an impact. So the question is, how do we discern where we should invest our money? In the United States, the last 6 months of life is half of all healthcare dollars. That's trillions of dollars that we as a society have chosen to invest in the last 6 months of life. No one thinks about it that way in the United States. But if you think about our budget, we don't have a budget problem in the US. We have a we don't die well problem in the United States. We don't know how to invest differently. If we took those same dollars and put it into a smart grid, early childhood education, entrepreneurship in disadvantaged communities, there are 100 things I guarantee you would have a higher multiple of impact on our lives and our well-being and our world than investing against the last 6 months of human life. But we don't think that way. We decided to put $1 trillion into home ownership in America to incent it with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I guarantee you they're better investments. But again, we haven't thought that way. So not only do corporations not do it, investment firms have not done it historically, but what is fascinating to me is it's becoming much more mainstream. Millennials, Gen Z, they don't want to work their whole lives and then get a chance to contribute. They want to be impactful today. They're 2 times more likely to buy from a company that has impact, and they're 3 times more likely to work for a company that has impact. That should give us all a lot of hope. And so I think the time is now. I think the measurement system is critical. If we don't have a common language that we can use, it's going to be very hard to proactively go after deals that are compelling businesses that also create impact.
Bill, this is great to hear. And as you know, Brazil has been going through a crisis. But it's interesting because in the technology market, you actually see a lot of VCs interested in Brazil. We have our very own first generation of unicorns. And so things actually look pretty positive on that side. Innovation has never ceased. The startup ecosystem is going well. So my question for you is, what calls your attention in Brazil right now? I think you have some investments in the country.
Yeah, I mean, we've been noticing the same thing. We funded a company called Resultados Digitais. Notice my Portuguese is I'm not even trying.
That was good.
Yeah,
not bad.
My father speaks Portuguese. He lived here 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in Rio, loves Brazil.
Yeah, you look like Carioca. It's, yeah, we can see it's very, very
I'm a
easy.
local,
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah, you're local, yeah.
I'm sort of local. I wish I were local. We've seen the same thing. We invested in Resultados Digitais, which was went from 100 people to 700 people in an incredibly short period of time. It's a leading SaaS marketing services company, incredible entrepreneur, Endeavor entrepreneur. Yeah. We just funded Digital House, which is launched originally in Argentina, is now launched here in São Paulo. It's creating digital education, which is a fascinating. The whole education theme is an amazing thread line here in Brazil. There's tremendous need, but it's also a tremendous growth opportunity that has derivative effects, which can be very profound for the economy. In general, the whole technology area, you tend to avoid any government issues with technology investments, and they tend to be entrepreneurs. They tend to really be committed to impact. It's almost natural. In fact, when you say to an entrepreneur, when you explain the whole idea of impact investing, entrepreneurs get it in 5 seconds. They're already there. Entrepreneurs building companies are building companies to have impact. That's why they're doing it for the most part.
And the social impacts company investments is something happen and work in Africa and work in Brazil.
That's right.
So you can copy paste lots of these ideas.
Absolutely right.
And just to understand which kind of company the Rise Fund have been investing, just to understand.
Yeah. Well, the beauty of it is it's very diverse. We've had extraordinary progress. I'm not supposed to tell you what percentage of the fund is invested.
But which kind of
it's
company?
Very substantial. In a 14 months, our problem has not been availability of great deals. We have a huge education sector. We just closed on a company called Dreambox recently, which is the most advanced algorithmic education platform in the world. We bought out Renaissance, which is another online education company. Lead, which is an education platform in India. So we have a big education. I mentioned Digital House here in Brazil and Argentina. We have agricultural companies like Dodla that I mentioned in India. So a lot of diversity from tech businesses. C3 IoT is one of the leading probably the leading Internet of Things company in the world, founded by Tom Siebel, who was Siebel Systems founder, already delivered 1.85 million tons of carbon reduction and solving for type 2 diabetes in the United States healthcare market. So tech companies, I mentioned this 121 times, we've invested in a biotechnology company, Viewpoint, that has developed eye drops that can cure cataracts with eye drops. Wow. You get a protein in your eye that makes the lens of the human eye, actually every lens of every animal, made of crystalline protein. And you get one set of these crystalline proteins over a lifetime. So as you age, they malform and it refracts light and you get that cloudy lens. And all of us will have cataracts if we live long enough. These eye drops cure that without surgery. There are 100 million people with impaired sight in the world due to cataracts. So it's these kind of remarkable innovations that we're investing against, in addition to sort of some very pedestrian, agricultural, industrial type businesses. And it's all over the world. We're in Africa with a company called Cellulant, which is a payments and digital identity based blockchain company. We're in India, in Myanmar, in the US, now in Latin America. So we're all over the world.
And how is Bono as a partner? We know as a singer, we know as a little bit of gossip.
Well, he's a mediocre singer, but no, he's an amazing partner. In fact, one of the great blessings in my life is when you do something like this, you get a chance to choose who you spend your time with. That's why I'm down here with you.
Talking, yeah.
And those founders, board members, Jeff Skoll, Bono, Queen Rania, Reid Hoffman, Benioff, Melody Hobson. These are just wonderful people who are doing this because they want to do this. No one has to do it. I spent 3 days last week with Bono in France with Ali, his wife, and his kids, and he's a very dear friend and a dear partner. He's remarkably productive. You know this. I mean, the guy works all the time. Totally committed, all engaged. It's not as if he doesn't have a day job as a rock star. I find it annoying that he wastes his time on that whole rock star thing, but he insists on it, unfortunately. Or Edge does, anyway.
Okay, so Bill, for entrepreneurs, there's also something amazing going on in Brazil, because you see entrepreneurs from the very north of the country until the very south. What do you look for when you do investments? You know, how do you select the entrepreneur, and how positive impact actually plays out in that decision? So I think this is actually a message that is very important for all the kids that are in Brazil now opening their companies. What do you look for?
The same question could be asked about what do you look for when you hire an impact investor, right? It's the same question. An entrepreneur, the great talent, you look for an entrepreneur. It's no different than what we always look for in an entrepreneur. Interestingly, the way these funds work is an investment comes in. We are normally very proactive and thematic about the way we hunt. We hunt for themes that we think are interesting. And if it's a great deal, we do the work. Meaning we believe in the company, the addressable market is exciting, the quality of the entrepreneur is exciting, et cetera. If it's also an impact company, it goes to Rise. If it's not, it goes to TPG Growth. Right. So it's the exact same underwriting team that tries to figure out who this entrepreneur is. And the thing I've always looked for in my life is a level of grit and stick-to-itiveness and drive, in addition to the obvious questions around talent and intellect. You know, most of the great entrepreneurs that we've worked with over the years, and we've worked with the best, they will things into being. There's just a level of verve and drive that you find in great entrepreneurs, in addition to the obvious need to select for talent and integrity and the basic skill set. It's a little like the Supreme Court ruling on pornography. You know it when you see it.
Yes.
But again, an impact entrepreneur is no different than a non-impact entrepreneur in terms of the core skill set. It's just that the business they're building belongs as an impact company versus a non-impact company.
Very good.
And trying to get closer, well, we did this Congress, we're putting these people together, trying to start building a digital agenda for the public sector in Brazil. So it's the first move, first step of that. And during the day today, we listened two nice examples, India and Estonia, most of them, that in some of the biggest solutions from the social problems, we have a partnership between the private sector and the government.
Yep.
And it works over there. So as you now that you have a strong mindset of social impact, how do you see countries like Brazil, that's well known as a corrupt country when you go to politics and this kind of thing, to invest money or to try to think about, okay, I can be partner with the government to find a solution, for example, for education, that we talk a lot about this, that we have like 200,000 schools in Brazil with 50 million students, and 95% are not, the schools are not connected.
Yeah.
So this could be a very strong social impact investment. Okay, I will connect the whole country, but I have to be a partnership with the government. So how do you see this kind of deals? Or no, I don't want to work with governments anyway?
So interestingly, in the past, we avoided ever working with governments. The whole question of the underwriting is, do I have to, in any way, be engaged with the government in order to be able to be effective? In certain governments, in certain companies, it's a regulation issue. We funded Azul here in Brazil, which was a very successful outcome for us. And David Neilman's a guy we'd known before from his JetBlue days, and David Bonderman knew him and thought very, very highly of him. And he was a remarkable entrepreneur. The government was relevant in that there's a license required and oversight and regulation, but you're not doing business with the government. And in general, we've avoided, if at all possible, doing business with the government. The one place where we're finding that to be a different dynamic is when it comes to impact. Because the beauty of impact is you can have a conversation with philanthropies and with governments in a way you never could when you're a private equity firm. So we just bought the largest safari company in Africa, Wilderness Safari. And we're using that as a platform to extend into other properties, large tracts of land that we can put into land trusts to preserve the ecosystem and the animals there. And we can do it in partnership with vehicles like the UN Catalytic Fund, because they trust that our agenda is an impact agenda. And we can show that it's an impact agenda because we measure it and we have to report on it and we're obligated to report on it. So this idea of blended finance, where you can partner with philanthropy, with governments to achieve a development agenda, because you can prove additionality, changes the paradigm completely. And interestingly, it's hard for governments to mess with you as well. If you have this kind of a spotlight, because Bono and all the rest of them create a lot of attention, it's hard to mess with Mo Ibrahim in Africa because of who he is on the continent and what he represents in terms of governance and transparency. So the advantage of our higher purpose and the spotlight on that higher purpose means you can actually find ways to cooperate in a way that traditional private equity just can't, because there's only one agenda with traditional private equity, and that's profits. Here, our agenda is impact and profits, collinear, and it's audited by third parties, which again changes the paradigm.
When you have impact, to me, it's easy to regulate also, no? Because
right.
if you have a social impact, even we are talking about drone deliveries and other stuff, if you put some issue that can make better for the community, it's much easier to...
It's a whole different conversation. Exactly right.
Yeah. So I heard you say that you have invested in a digital ID company in India, is that correct?
No, in Africa, Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Yep.
Okay, so what is your
Even
view?
dicier than India.
Right, okay. What is your view about this sector? Because we've spent a good part of the day talking about this and the possibilities in Brazil. How do you see, for instance, the blockchain as impacting digital IDs?
Yep.
And also the whole trend of debating what should a digital ID be?
It's interesting. To me, it's not really a debate. I had the chance to sit with the former president of Estonia last night over dinner, and listening to his story, it is so accretive to a society. The debate about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think, is over. There are certain government interests that may not want it because it creates transparency and it cuts out the middleman at the end of the day. Yeah. But if you look at the case study of what this company did in Nigeria, it's absolutely fascinating. They were established initially to create a direct connection between the government and 20 million farmers in Nigeria, where they disperse $500 million a year of subsidized support for the buying of seeds and fertilizer. And what was happening was the 500 million, by the time it got to the farmer, historically was 45 million. So all along the way, as it was being dispensed, it was being gobbled up. So the finance minister and the health minister, the finance minister agreed to partner with this company. They hired 16,000 people because they had to move very quickly to create this ecosystem, because otherwise they were afraid they'd be killed by the interests that were losing $400 million a year of income. So they very quickly created a network of banks, 20 different banks across the continent, all the fertilizer and seed companies, and they signed up 20 million farmers. And they used blockchain to create a unique digital identity for each farmer so they could verify the existence of that particular individual. And now the farmers get their capital, their money directly from the government to their phone. They buy on their phone the subsidized seed and fertilizer. And just 2 months ago, the first buy from the global ag companies happened. General Mills bought $250 million worth of output directly from that consortium of farmers through the same devices.
Government involved in it.
No interplay, no intermediary. So you think of the power of that, it's transformative to the farmers, the small stakeholder farmers, to the government that's genuinely trying, to the extent there are well-intentioned people trying to directly distribute support to those farmers, which they were. It's transformative. And I can't imagine any argument against it at the end of the day, particularly with innovations like mobile phones. I mean, more people have mobile phones than have a bank account. More people have mobile phones than have a toilet today. There's 7 billion mobile phones on Earth. So what's extraordinary now is the opportunity to use that technology, to use AI and big data, and use cloud solutions to deliver real live opportunities, real live solutions and transparency to these people is an absolute game changer. And part of it begins with a digital identity, the ability to actually find who that person is and give them what you want to deliver to them.
Very good. I asked about Bono. It's going to be a bit harder now, but much in debate whether democracies now is at risk. A few leaders with conflicting ideas about democracy are coming to power by voting.
Yep. And
in Brazil, we are 3 months away from the elections, and with a completely, indefined
it's still a mystery.
scenario. And so I want to ask you how it was being for you as an entrepreneur and it's a leader in the United States, the relationship with Trump and your opinion about him up to now.
Well, I'm a regular watcher of Colbert. I don't know if that tells you anything. I mean, for all of you and for anyone who's sane, it's been an absolutely bizarre time. I mean, the U.S. historically, Bono described it as an idea, not a place, but an idea. The United States, even here in the south of America, the United States stood for something important. Not always good. There's a long history, obviously, of problems, but we stood for rule of law and integrity and what you say matters and truth, and the notion that we would have a president of the United States who's been saying what he's been saying and doing what he's been doing is hard to even grok. And the scariest part about it is that all of us might be getting used to this. We might start thinking the U.S. can be like Italy, you know, and have a leader who behaves that way. And so I've found it deeply unsettling to have lived through this. I find it hard to read the newspaper, but I force myself to because it's such a bizarre soap opera. The only good news in the United States...
We have a local bizarre soap opera also.
Yeah, ours has been bizarre. The only good news about the United States is our founding fathers were brilliant enough to create a system of government that doesn't work very well. So the reality is it's expensive, but it doesn't work very well. So a lot of the power remains at the state level, and our system of divided government keeps a check and balance that's quite powerful. So you hear him bloviating all the time and making these declarations. If my friend Omid Kurdistani would shut off Twitter, we'd all be in a pretty good place because he can't do much other than bloviate. What's not happening is a lot of progress on issues that are really critical. If you look at what's going on with the environment, what's going on around immigration issues, what's going on with international relations and the way he's behaving. And by the way, we all know the Russians have to have something on him because, I mean, why else would you behave this way? It's totally surreal. But other than a lot of noise, the reality is most of the business community carries on and does what the business community does. Now our budget deficit is ballooning dramatically because of his tax initiatives. So we're going to have to pay for that at some point. Gravity does exist at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I think if you see Trump as the most powerful guy in the world, maybe today's. I was reading a good article from Bernard-Henri Lévy, that's a good philosopher, and he was telling that he thinks that most of the problems that Europe are facing now is because about the last 20 years Europe was taking care of borders, currency, business stuff, and forgot to take a look on politics and to renew politics and to build a new generation of politics.
Same issue in the US.
So I want to hear about you, how your connection with politics, and what do you think about what we are trying to do in Brazil with the civic movement to renew the politics in Brazil.
I think you guys, it's not as obvious here, but all of us face an existential issue right now, which makes the conversation around digital government and identity and all that all the more critical, because while we're busily distracted with the daily tweet nonsense, at a fundamental level, there are some very big issues that are coming very fast. And if you look at where Bernie Sanders was coming from on one end of the spectrum, it's not that different than Trump. It's all a reflection, I mean, different set of policy suggestions for sure, but it's all a reflection of the fact that you have a substantial percentage of Americans who believe that the world is not going in the right direction, who believe that they don't have a fair opportunity, who believe that the future is a worse place for them and their children than the past. That is not a place you want your society to be. That's not a stable place. And the fact is, we had a big political topic in this last election, which was coal. Coal represents about 50,000 jobs in America. It's totally irrelevant. Meanwhile, if you look at autonomous trucking alone, it's 8.5 million jobs. And this is coming. So automation and what it's going to do to employment in the United States, and questions around where does that wealth go? When you have a solution like autonomous driving, is it the Teslas of the world or the Googles that accrue all the wealth and the shareholders of those companies and the entrepreneurs behind them? What happens to the people who need a job? What happens to the people who need a dignified way of engaging in society? How do we redefine what a job is? in a world where productivity is improved to the point where people don't need to be spending 8 hours a day in drudgery. So these are all big questions that require a level of maturity that we have not demonstrated, certainly our current president has not demonstrated, have the ability to actually have an intelligent conversation about, and we better get going, because it is coming, and it's coming like a tsunami. And it's going to happen here too.
But 2 years ago, if someone told that Trump is going to be president, he's going to win the elections, how was your reaction a few years ago?
It was impossible to imagine. I mean, when he did that little escalator, did you guys see the video footage of him doing the escalator? No. Walk down for his announcement he's running for president. He literally comes down an escalator at Trump Tower, and there's all this bunting, like American flag bunting. And it was so absurd, you thought, this is hilarious. I mean, when he did it, I thought, this is the most undignified, absurd thing I've ever seen. And then he goes and gets elected. So please don't follow our lead and do something similar here.
We're going to try hard.
So, Bill, you mentioned the problem of jobs, and automation might be able to, transform the job market completely. And a lot of people might lose their jobs because of that. And you're investing in educational companies.
Yep.
What are the skills you think we should teach people from now on in order to be prepared for, what might be a very important change in the job market?
Well, it's a hot topic in all education. I'm on several educational boards, at Stanford Business School and at my children's school. And obviously, we're one of the largest education investors now in the world. And so we have advisors like Arne Duncan, who was the former Secretary of Education, and Rick Levin, the former president of Yale, and others that are helping us try to go to exactly that question. And there are a lot of great thinkers that would have different points of view, but fundamentally, everyone arrives at the same place, which is what we're teaching our students today has to be relevant to a world we can't even conceive of yet. So what it comes down to is sort of the ability to be adaptable, the ability to learn, teachability, all the creativity. These are the skills that don't come from STEM alone, they come from STEAM. You have to have the arts, you have to have technology and all of that embedded into an educational path, and everyone has to have access to it, or we're in a real tough place as a society. One other thing I would just mention is probably the only source of stress in my life at this point is my children, is being a parent. I care so deeply for them. I have a 13, 15, and 17-year-old. One's getting ready to do the college journey. And I woke up one day in Marin County, California, and realized I'd created this lovely environment for our children, very different from the way I grew up, which was much more challenging. And I realized, oh my God, have I created kids with no grit? No ability. Do you guys know what the term what grit means? No, I don't. It's the ability to fight. It's the, stick in there, and like what I mentioned about entrepreneurs, the stick-to-itiveness and fight and all that.
Like the Joanne movie, True Grit.
In Portuguese, culhão.
Culhão.
Yeah.
So I was suddenly aware that I had created this lovely environment where we had someone cooking and someone doing the laundry and someone doing the garden, and they went to this lovely school where everything they said was important. So I picked up my kids and I moved to India for a year. My wife and I moved to Mumbai, and it turns out when you get to Mumbai, you realize the world is not like Marin County, California at all. And it was great to give them that. I think one of the other challenges we have as a society is many of the people in this room have done their best to create a better environment for their families. And what are we doing to make sure that people have the drive and the grit to be successful in what will be a very challenging world they face?
And we started today with a chat with Cristiane he was here in the morning, that she spent almost her whole life without ID, without documents. Her mom has 17 kids. Wow. The mom have no documents. She have not any.
That's grit.
And she spent 10 years of her life trying to become a citizen, to have an ID. And for 10 years, she was trying to have a document. So by the end of the day, what we are talking about here, and what I think most of us are here, and I can be honest, that's why I'm spending time and energy, it's how we can leave a legacy behind that we can make people's better, not for us, but for in a country like the Brazil, that the gap is huge. Yep. About how by the end, when we get older, we look around and we don't have the same country as we have now. So these are the efforts that we are spending now, and that's why we need to connect. We need to open Brazil to the world and to see where's the good ideas and try to make this country more efficient, more productive, more clever, how they treat people.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I'm actually hopeful about Brazil, optimistic about Brazil. I am. I mean, it's in some ways been the ever-receding rainbow as a country.
I call you in 3 months to say.
Yeah, I think you guys have the fundamentals. I mean, the hard part when you look at the global landscape is to have the demographic that Brazil has, the natural resources Brazil has, is unique. And you're right, there are very significant challenges, but it feels like Brazil is waking up, thanks in part to what all of you are doing. And maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I am.
And just try and start to close our conversation by the day today pop up the sentence that data is the new oil. Mm-hmm. Do you believe in that?
Actually, we were among the first people to actually say that as a firm. Yeah. So I do believe it, since we helped coin the term. No, it is fascinating to me, because I can actually tell you from direct experience, we have about 150 billion of revenue in our portfolio, and I can point to the actual oil generation that resulted from the use of big data and analytics within our own portfolio. It's extraordinary. So I think the most interesting areas right now to look at globally in innovation are life sciences, because it's fascinating what's going on, and the whole paradigm of development within life sciences has changed over the last 5 years due to stem cells, immune therapy, the whole outsourcing. Exactly, and we've invested in CRISPR within the RISE Fund, by the way. And then the second is just the whole area of analytics and the potential of absolutely transforming government and the way businesses operate with the kind of
Can I follow up on your question? So if data is the new oil, can it leak and provoke environmental damage as well?
No, that's the good news. No environmental externalities. In fact, it'll help us identify the environmental externalities. If you think about what we're saying with RISE, it's sort of the same point. We're saying that absent data, absent a clear view, a crisp, clear view of the world, it's impossible for us to change capitalism from amoral to moral. And it's not that capitalism is immoral. I'm being subtle here. Sorry for English second language people. It's not that it's immoral, it's amoral. There's no moral compass unless you bring data to bear. And that's where you can then value externalities and hope that we can all make the right kind of decisions about, what form of energy we use or how we deploy education in a society.
Okay, and to the last question, I cannot sit with you and not ask, because by the end of the day, I'm still in the entertainment industry. Mm-hmm. And you've been investing a lot on this. You have STX, you producing movies, music, platforms. So I'm not sure if everybody in this room has all the curiosity that I have for the entertainment industry, but you think that it's going to change a lot? What is your point of view about this industry around the world?
Well, I mean, the reason we've invested in the industry is because we think it's going through an absolutely extraordinary growth cycle, and the structure of it's fundamentally changing. We invested in Spotify, which has been one of the great successes, and we created a new movie studio. We invested in iFlix, which is the equivalent of a Netflix for the rest of the world on mobile phones. What's happening is you've got 1 billion people that have come online with mobile phones that are engaging with content in a way that was never possible before. So you're amplifying the market in an absolutely extraordinary way in all forms of content. So we think it's an incredibly exciting time to be globally, we just invested in a record label in Africa, the leading record label. So, I mean, we love the entertainment space in general. We're the largest investor in the space, and think it's a fascinating time to be investing.
Bem, senhoras e senhores, Bill McGlashan, muito obrigado. Thanks
Thank you.
a lot.
That was great.
It was great. Thank you, Ronaldo.